I'm sorry for the long intro, but I had to start it somehow. Anyways, welcome to episode 2 of this series, and today's topic is arcade mode. Now, arcade mode is the main mode of this game, and it alone is what many, and I mean many people, see this game as. So, let's get started. Of course, arcade modes aren't the main aspect of any fighter today. You could think of them more of a side dish compared to the main course, which is multiplayer. Back in the 90s and early 2000s, arcade mode was the main course, because that's where you got endings, rival fights, and progression, and only really started feeling like a side dish once training mode, online versus, and other dedicated modes became real gameplay hooks. Take the game I'm talking about for example. It had 2 endings that basically led to the same outcome, and in Model 2 fighting games they usually had lots of extra content in the arcade modes, for example like a random mode, a ranking mode, or even expert modes. Sonic the Fighters does have these, but we'll get to those later. And while online play did exist back then, like Midway's experimental and expensive WaveNet cabinets for Mortal Kombat 3, however those were rare exceptions, and I highly doubt Sega's AM2 team were even aware of WaveNet's existence. Now, unlike other things in this game that are very messy inside the code internally, trust me, I know from experience, surprisingly, the way arcade mode works is actually all nice and neat, and it's actually much more simple than you might think. When you select a character and the screen fades, the game points to a certain array and picks out the first 2 bytes. The first byte is the character value, while the other one is the stage. But the full array actually looks like this. Yeah, it's quite long. Out of the 10 stages in arcade mode, you have 9 normal fights and a bonus fight. So, let's take a short look at these fights. The first one you see in the game is Knuckles, and to put it lightly, he's about as powerful as a paper straw. You could beat him very easily, but the funny thing is that he's actually a top tier in this game. Wow. I sure hope there isn't any reason why this character is placed here, and I wonder why his AI is so idiotic. Then, once you reach stage 2, this is where the game actually throws playable computers at you. This one being Amy, who introduces sidestepping and barriers, and she holds the barrier button like she's legally binded to it, and sometimes sidesteps, playing more defensively. Then you have Bark, a very strong character, and his moves really show that. He is the grappler of this game, while some people don't really say he's that good at grappling, and when he grabs you, say goodbye to 50% or more of your health bar. He also showcases the squished state, which doesn't come into play a lot, but it is very bad for you most of the time. SBO is more aggressive and likes to use grabs more than Bark, but doesn't really introduce much. Then you have Tails. He's a that's his unique quality. Then you have Fang, who introduces projectiles. They can be crouched. Some projectiles can be crouched, but the easiest way to avoid them is via barriers, since no projectiles break barriers at all. Then you have Bean, the most unpredictable one, who uses Hyper, and he is very energetic, and he's one of my favorite computers to fight in this mode, considering all the crazy he can do. And then you have Sonic, the last one in the main aim, and he's basically everything you learned up to this point. One thing to notice is that the CPUs also love to use weapon grab, so keep that in mind. And weapon grab allows the other players to grab you easier without getting typo punch. And then you reach the final stage of the game, Metal Sonic.
I'm magnificent plan! This is it! This is really...
Well, if you've played this game before, at least in arcade mode, or the average fighting game player, you will know people call him the very nice name, Professional Quarter Stealer, and has 2 degrees in too much damage. All of his moves do way too much damage than they normally should, specifically Emerald Dive, and then he has a laser projectile, which, reminds you, covers the entire stage. Yep. You can't duck it, you can't sidestep it, even though it lasts 2 decades, so you better not go to that specific section of the stage for a little bit. Oh yeah, and all of his moves are like frame 9 or faster, so Good luck with him! And then you have Mech Eggman, the last fight you have, or the game calls him a bonus fight. As the stage transitions, Eggman comes out of one of the doors, and you have a total of 15 seconds to defeat him. Thankfully, you get infinite hyper mode, and this version of hyper mode is actually unique. You can actually break barriers with this one, and all the damage from it actually scales to what the normal damage is for that certain move. So it's a lot stronger here. Even if you don't beat him, you'll still be taken to the winning screen, and you're still allowed to input your name. He is a bonus fight after all, so I didn't know what else I could have expected, but, you know, that's it. Also, a reward is seeing the Death Egg explode and seeing the credits. Yep, that's it. Also, despite being featured in the intro, Rocket Metal and Robo-Egg don't even show up at all, likely due to time-related reasons, but there are 3 extra doors in the Death Egg's hangar stage, so possibly 3 extra fights are planned. Also, something cool is that if you play as Sonic and never lose a single round, yes, I said round, not match, and win 1 round against Metal Sonic, activating Hyper Mode allows you to play as Super Sonic for the last 2 stages of the game. You get infinite Hyper Mode, specifically the version that allows you to break barriers, and you can't take damage. Yeah, that's it. Alright, so now that I've talked about arcade mode a lot, now let's talk about the more interesting parts about it. One of the main ones being, how do the stage transitions work? Well, once you beat stage 7, the game literally checks the stage's value, and if it matches, it plays one of the cutscenes. And then you have 8 and 9. These are interesting, but they're a lot more simple than you might think. Stage 8 is programmed when you beat it, it automatically loads the next stage. So basically, stage 8 sets up for stage 9. So, stage 8 loads in the stage and the camera, while stage 9 is the animation player. You'll also might recall that I said that arcade mode works by using this long array of bytes. You might be thinking what happens if we replace this with another character in stage. Well, surprisingly, it works completely fine with some characters. But if you use characters like UFO, Eggman, and Rocket Metal, they act weird, as if the game detects the character does not have a moveset or shares a moveset table with someone else, mainly Knuckles. It will give them this moveset temporarily, and this also works for the clone characters that have no moves. Mainly, 16 and 17 who infamously never had moves that the player could use. And when the CPU is often controlling them, because there is no real AI set for them, the game doesn't know what to do and often just does a bunch of random inputs. Going back to what I said about the stages, there are some oddities with this. Mainly is that one of them is that stage 7 will always play the cutscene no matter what position it's in, and functions fine for the most part. But if you put the Death Egg's I stage early game and beat it, and have stage 9 after it, the emeralds won't appear as the bonus stage turns off the emerald UI that's displayed. Now, what happens if there's a gap between the 2 stages? Well, that's where it gets interesting. Once you beat stage 8, things look normal, however the animations don't play, and the second player is made invisible. Then, the next stage starts once it ends. When you beat the second stage and go to stage 9, the game gets confused, and pulls sprites from the versus screen, rather than the countdown the cutscene plays like if an actual match was starting, with no camera position, and if you try to fight in this state, things like grabs and other moves can be interrupted. Why this happens is more simple than you might think. There's a flag in the game when stage 8 is beaten, and because stage 9 isn't loaded, this flag is never cleared, it seems like. So whenever you go to stage 9, it will recognize this and start playing the cutscene that way, since animations in this game are considered as moves. Which is why the aforementioned move canceling happens. Another thing about the CPUs is that the CPUs love to do frame 1 crouches and grabs. However, it's not too extreme like Mortal Kombat 2's computers. They go for weapon grabs very often, and they usually have the same attack pattern. It's safe to say, because of how the AI was in this game, many reviewers criticized the mode, due to it taking no skill, and well, they're right, to some extent. You can spam the punch button for about 10 minutes and win, but that's not fun. And let's be real here, game reviewers, at least most of them, don't have good taste in video games. I mean, IGN is a good example of that. So their opinions don't matter at all, because most of them are incorrect anyways.
I missed. I thought it was just an all-new game.
No, reimagine level.
Yeah, it's only
Remix
going to be like you're going through
level.
Green Hill Zone from Sonic 2. Green Hill Zone from Sonic 2.
Now let's get into how the CPU's rankings actually work, because they do have difficulty settings you can enable. Now there's 4 difficulties: easy, normal, hard, and hardest. So what's the difference between these? Well, it's nothing much really. Depending on the difficulty selected, it will make the cuters more or less aggressive. Besides, level 1 is almost the same difficulty-wise. On the hardest difficulty, Sonic shares the same AI as Metal Sonic and Mech Eggman, which I thought was interesting, and Mech Eggman is the only character whose difficulty does not scale no matter what difficulty selected, and it's actually the same AI as Metal Sonic, believe it or not. Yeah, apparently it is. Now, how the AI reacts to certain things is very complex, but to dumb it down, it works like this: how much damage they've taken, how much the player's taken damage, the stage value, and the amount of barriers they have. You might be thinking, if the AI functions like this and is somewhat complex, how is the AI so bad? Well, that's unknown for the most part, but if I had to guess, it's because the majority of the code was carried over from fighting Vipers. And as Sonic the Fighters was built off it, tons of assets were still left over, so I wouldn't be surprised if they carried over the same AI system from that game with some changes to it, to account for the barrier system and that sort of thing. Now, arcade mode has some unused stuff too, mainly the route on how arcade mode was going to go. Now, there's not a lot of information out there, but with the information that we have, we can kind of piece together on how things were going to go. One of the mainly important ones was that Knuckles was originally on Stage 8 rather than Stage 1, Metal Sonic's stage name is labeled as Stage 9 rather than Final Stage, and Mechless Eggman was the final boss instead of Mech Eggman, who was also in a tank at one point, and there's also a timer in the bottom right, a carryover from Fighting Vipers. Now, there's a few things to unpack here, mainly the Knuckles and Mechless Eggman stuff. If you put Knuckles on Stage 8, you can see he's actually quite challenging. I'm assuming the devs most likely put Sonic on Stage 8 as opposed to Knuckles, is because Knuckles mainly has a basic moveset, given that a lot of the unused characters have him as a base, while Sonic has a more unique things in his kit. So they decided to add some extra code to the CPU on Stage 1 to make it have the amount of brain cells as a tissue box. And that design philosophy makes no sense to me. And then there's Mechless Eggman. That's a big bombshell for a lot of reasons. It's a long story, but to sum it up shortly, the devs weren't sure if they wanted him in a mech or not. That's why the tank thing was there, but ultimately, they went with a mech. As Mechless Eggman is an interesting character, but he's not frightening. As you can imagine, he has the slowest movement speed, and his unused one is actually slower than you might think. A small amount of moves, mainly being a mix of Beta Tails' moveset and Bean's bombs. That's it. And the way his model was didn't really allow the developers to really give him some interesting moves, besides basic stuff, which is why he was ultimately cut and replaced with Mech Eggman. Anyways, let's get back to our main topic here. Arcade mode has even more unused stuff, such as Flickies and Pockies, which most likely were also going to be there for Emeralds, and some capsule to go with it. There's also a black Emerald, so maybe Eggman could turn off your hyper mode state at some point, but honestly that's just a guess. There's also 2 unused modes, one being random mode and a ranked mode. Random mode is simple. Every character is randomized to be any of the main 8 and stops after Metal Sonic. However, due to it being broken, its only role is Knuckles. And this mode does not let you enter your high score into the leaderboard once you beat it. This was the main reason and inspiration behind the randomizer streams, and how I even started doing them in the first place. Then you have ranked mode, and it's a carryover from Honestly, you should know at this point, and it works as well as you think it will. After you beat the game, you're able to enter in your score. However, you also get to see your ranking, just like in Fighting Vipers. However, it's all messed up. Look at this. It looks like it was drawn by a 4th grader. Mainly because of the fact that most of the textures that were used in this were deleted in the middle of development. So obviously this mode wasn't really worked on the heaviest, to say the least. However, the game still keeps track of your score, and it does it well, because, well, it was just a direct port from Fighting Vipers. There's also an unused Stage 0 that I talked about before. It's just Sonic over South Island. However, the first round, once it's completed, crashes. It can be filled with extra data, however, to, have a different fight and stage. However, it will still crash, due to it not picking up the replay data.
I figured I'd talk about this one quickly, as Honey was going to put it as a segment in this video. However, the audio recording for it got corrupted, so I figured I'd sum it up here. Basically, there is an unused fight for Rocket Metal in arcade mode, and it can be restored by setting the arcade stage's value to 1 higher than the Mech Eggman fight. You will be able to see him in the versus screen. However, it won't start, so you have to edit the arcade array to get him to function properly. When it loads in, though, you realize quickly that it's broken, as there wasn't any CPU data assigned to him, so it picks the default. And it's just a coincidence that Rocket Metal is in this slot. How? Well, it turns out the value it uses for the character is one that is usually a clone of a character with no moves. So sadly, even Rocket Metal's fight is just a coincidence and wasn't actually left over, which is sad. But you can load a CPU of him, so I guess that's something. And no, there are no unused Mechless, Eggman, Robo-Egg, or any other unused character's arcade stage left over. You can do the method mentioned previously of replacing a character and adding in the character you want. Keep in mind that Rocket Metal and UFO Eggman's fights act weird, as their CPU data isn't present for them.
Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into this mode. It's clear the developers had a lot in mind, but due to time constraints, they ran into issues and had to cut some corners with it. And I would not be here without this mode. I wouldn't even be a part of the modding scene if random mode wasn't unused either. Arcade mode, while flawed, I hold fondly, and is one of my favorite things in this game. Hopefully one day, some arcade assets can be restored in a functional and easily accessible state, but hey, I'm happy the way arcade mode is right now.